and welcome to another book review video on our Book Cavern channel. Today is something a little bit different, so usually my videos tend to go towards the darker aspect of stories such as horror, gore, psychological terror, you know, the dark things that wander in the night. But every now and then I like to read a smutty romance. Don't come at me, I like it. I've seen the first 2 seasons of Bridgerton. Really, I binged watched them. I loved watching them. I loved watching them so much. And so I thought I would go back and read Julia Quinn's first few books, which is the Bridgerton series, which I've already done videos for, and some of them can be linked up there. I think I'll link the playlist up there. They weren't the best. They didn't thrill me the way that the series had done. So, well, maybe that's her first few books. You know, give her a bit of time. So I thought, right, well, I've seen Bridgerton already. I'll read Bridgerton. I'll read the first one, which is this one. This is part of the Illumicrate set. I've got the full set. It's like down there behind me. Starting with The Duke and I, and I just love this cover of this book. It's just lovely. Look at it. I mean, you can't really see it because of the light. Oh, there we go. There it is. Beautiful. But yeah, it's a beautiful edition. The story, we'll get into it. So, like I said, this is the first book in the Bridgerton series. It is called The Duke and I, and it focuses on the Duke of Hastings and Daphne Bridgerton, and she's the eldest Bridgerton daughter, because all their names range from A to H. A to H, there's like 8 of them. Now, this book opens with a prologue, and it opens with a prologue detailing the circumstances of, let me get this right, Simon Arthur Henry Fitzranulph Bassett. That's his name, and she repeats this 3 times on the first page. Once was enough. Just once was it. You never hear of the rest of these middle names the whole way through the book. Once was enough. And like I said, we open with the circumstances of his birth, and his mother is the Duchess of Hastings, and she is quite frail, quite petite, she's quite weak, and she's already lost several babies trying to get a Hastings heir. She hasn't had a boy yet, they haven't had a child. And she's already lost several children in varying terms of the pregnancy. And the doctors told her that to have another baby would be to kill her, basically. But she's hell-bent on a sense of duty to provide the current Duke, her husband, with an heir so the title can pass down through the generations still. She sees it as her failing. It's never the man's failing in these books, it's always the female, of course. And it's not like the Duke of Hastings is saying, well, stop it, stop trying, just, it's not good for you. He keeps saying, I need to have an heir, I need to have an heir, I need to have an heir. This whole generational ancestry cannot die with me because of your failing. He's such a nice guy. And of course, the Duchess dies right after giving birth to Simon. She pulls a Jane Seymour, more or less. You know, begets the heir, and off she pops. Although with doctors that say, and I quote, gravity might keep the babe inside for a little bit longer so that it can more fully develop, this is when she was having pangs like a month early. So they put pillows and cushions under her hips, and she had to lie that way for an entire month. She wasn't allowed to get out of bed, she wasn't allowed to roll over, she wasn't even allowed to wriggle a bit. But she had to sleep with her pelvis up in the air so the baby would stay inside of her. Is it any wonder she died? seriously with advice like that. But I know what I'm getting into with these kinds of books. It's logic is not something that's included in these. Now Simon's born and is handed off to a nurse, as is the custom. His father hardly sees him. And all goes well in the Hastings household until Simon is about 4. So he's only like a toddler. He's a child. And he's only 4 years old. But the one thing that's wrong is that he hasn't actually spoken yet. He hasn't actually learned to talk. He's not said a word. Nothing. The child is mute. And as the years go on and the child gets to 4, the Duke, his father, is getting more and more angry and annoyed that a child of his loins is not a perfect specimen of manhood. The kid's 4. And with a father like that, who would want to? And he starts getting more verbally abusive to him. He calls him an idiot. He calls him a half-wit. He calls him a moron. All to his face, to the detriment of the child. Say, you can't talk, you're a moron. I can't believe that you're my heir. You're just an idiot. The whole estate's going to go to a half-wit. That kind of thing. And she writes it really very well. And it's only when the Duke has grabbed a hairbrush from the nurse, is advancing on his child to whack him with it, does Simon finally speak. And his first word is no. But when he continues to try to speak, and for a couple of seconds the Duke is like, oh my God, my perfect child, Simon has a stutter. And he tries to talk and he keeps falling over his words. The Duke just hits the roof. He says, I've given birth to a moron. I can't believe that Hastings' name is going to be going to a idiot. And he turns, and instead of praising the child for finally talking like he wanted him to, he leaves. He leaves the house and he doesn't come back. Because in his eyes, the fact that his only heir to the glorious Hastings estate, the fact that he has a stutter and is not immeasurably perfect, is catastrophic. Ultimately catastrophic. He can't believe it. And he leaves the house to go to London and doesn't see his son for 7 years. Doesn't write to him. Doesn't ask after him. Nothing. It's like the child has just never existed. Now, the nurse ends up taking Simon to visit his father in London to show him how well his speech has come on, because he can more or less control his stutter unless he gets anxious or angry. And there's a scene where he's talking fine to the nurse and the butler, but they get to the house and they don't know who he is. Because his father has told everybody in London, the servants, the ton, everybody, that the kid is dead. That he has no living child. It died. And that's why they haven't seen him, and he doesn't mention him, nothing. So when Simon actually turns up, his father is looming over him and says, "Speak, boy, speak." And it is extremely intimidating. And of course he tries not to be intimidated. But I mean, this guy abandoned him for talking like that. And he's getting really anxious. And he says a few things correctly. But then he stutters a little bit. And his father just says, "Just take him away. I don't want anything to do with him. Take him away. I don't want to see him again." And turns his back on him and leaves. And that's the introduction to the male main character, who thankfully is not that. But this is one of the main themes and the main sort of antagonistic thread between Daphne and Simon all the way through this book. That is the main sort of underlying reason for practically everything that happens in this. But that prologue, at least that part, serves well to set up these characters and their motivations behind it. So we switch to the present day and we find Daphne reading the latest scandal sheet from Lady Whistledown. And she's reading this sheet in company with her mother in their parlour. Now, one of the bigger differences that I saw with the book and the actual show is that Daphne in the book has already been out in 2 seasons already. This one will be her 3rd. And in the show, that started with her coming out for her 1st season. And in this one, she's already been out 2 seasons. And her mother, Violet, is getting a bit anxious because she wants to marry her off. That's the whole point of having a daughter, is that you can marry her off very quickly. Daphne in the book has already had 4 marriage proposals by the point this book starts. And she's rejected every single one of them. With her brother Anthony's blessing. He doesn't get involved like he does in the show. She's rejected all 4 of them because she just couldn't see herself living with them. They just wouldn't suit her, etc. And it's actually, the words are actually written in here that she is not like other girls. And most of the male faction of the Ton actually only see her as a friend because she's easy to talk to, she's easy to get along with, and they just see her as a friend and not an actual marriage partner. It says this in the same few paragraphs where it says she's already been proposed to 4 times. Some of it's a bit squiffy. And the reading between Violet and Daphne, they're reading the 4th instalment of the Lady Whistledown scandal sheet. It's only been going 4 months, so we're in April, more or less. And it really sets up their relationship dynamic, which is in stark contrast to the relationship dynamic which is set up with Simon and his father. It is just oil and water to what Daphne's is with her mother. And the whole reason they get together is Daphne's elder brother, Anthony, is the Viscount now because their father has passed on. And he's head of the family initially. And he meets with his friend, Simon Bassett, now the Duke of Hastings because his father's dead. Thank God. Couldn't have happened to a nice bloke. And they're sat at their club and they are discussing, Simon's just come back from overseas, he hasn't been in England. He only came back because his father died, because he didn't want to see him. And they're discussing Simon actually being in society and what he can come to expect from being invited to all these balls and dances and whatevers. And that is that overbearing society mothers will crowd around him and want every single one of their daughters to marry him. He will be the prize that they would be able to get. He wants to capture all of them, and he insinuates that his mother Violet is the worst one of the lot. But even this, and after all this conversation of marriage, etc., he invites Simon to dine with him and his family at their home, and it's going to be an informal dinner. And he quickly tells Simon, don't worry, I know all this talk of the marriage mart, I'm not going to try and set you up with my sister, you wouldn't suit each other. So I've got absolutely no worries on that score. You wouldn't like her, she wouldn't like you, you just wouldn't get along in that way. And she's my sister, just don't. Now, it is even written in here that Anthony allows Daphne to have her own opinions on who she will marry, contrary to the dictates of the time, which says that you will marry who you're told and smile. Now, the last marriage proposal that Daphne got was the week before this starts, and that was from a guy called Nigel Burbrook, which rang alarm bells in my mind compared to the show. We'll get there. And it's the second time that he's asked her, and the second time that she's rejected him. The night that Anthony meets Simon and the whole Daphne Whistledown thing goes on, is the night of the Danbury Ball, the opening ball of the season. And this is the night that is extremely significant because this is the night that Simon and Daphne finally meet, albeit in a rather scandalous fashion. And it goes on from there. That is where they make their pact to get the society mothers off of his back and get her mother off of her back. That is her motivation. She wants the time to be able to find somebody that she loves and to stop being paraded around like all the other little misses. And he, of course, wants the society mothers off his back. He wants to be able to go to a party without getting thronged with people. So they come up with a plan that is an age-old trope. It's been done so many times before. But They come up with the plan for them to fake an attachment to each other. So they're going to pretend that they've just fallen madly in love with each other. Hastings is courting Daphne, and the mothers will leave Hastings alone, and because Violet will believe that the Duke is interested in her daughter, she'll leave Daphne alone. And if a Duke is interested in Daphne, then all the other guys will see Daphne as marriage material. It will elevate her from friendship status. Now, it actually says in the book something that is actually written well, that Hastings thinks, well, if the guys didn't want her before, wouldn't she be a bit shallow to want them when they didn't want her, but only want her because they see her as an elevated in status, not for herself, but for another man, because another guy's interested in her, and then suddenly they're all interested in her. So I get that, but that was only a sentence, and it's never alluded to again. So now we're going to get into some of the differences between the book and the show, because I'll just come out with it right now. If I had read the book before I'd seen the show, I wouldn't have bothered. I don't know whether Julia Quinn wrote the script for the show, or whether Shonda rewrote the script for the show, but the show does it oh so better. The book just focuses on Daphne and Simon. That is the spotlight, and everybody else is just background characters. You don't get any other storylines in this apart from theirs, which is, of course, you can't just have that in the show. It'd be just a couple of episodes. But the whole Featherington family, the father is dead already, so that whole storyline of him gambling and them having absolutely no money at all doesn't happen. I think Penelope gets mentioned maybe once or twice, having been dragged around with her mother with her two other sisters. Penelope has another sister called Felicity. Yeah, Penelope has a younger sister, so there's 4 Featherington sisters in this book. And she's called Felicity, and she hangs around with Hyacinth, who is the youngest Bridgerton daughter. And Penelope hangs around with Eloise. And Eloise is only mentioned once in this too. So she's really a background character. And like I said, the whole coming out the season, the diamond of the season, etc. isn't in this. The Queen, Prince Frederick, that whole diamond of the season and that coming out thing is not in this. I expected a bit to be in it. But no, that was just made for the show. And thank God. So that means that the whole Prince Frederick storyline of Daphne using him to get the Duke jealous, etc. doesn't happen. Doesn't happen at all. And one of the things that I can't decide whether the show did better or the book did is having Daphne's brother Anthony. In the show, he doesn't know this scheme between Simon and Daphne of fake it till you make it, kinda. In the book, he's let on in it extremely early. After that first night, he's let in on it the day after. And he's not really happy with it, but he'll go along with it because he gets why. And I can't decide whether I like that better than the show or not. In the show, Anthony is insufferable in the first few episodes because he tries to have her marry, or he actually engages her to this guy, Nigel Burbrook. And man, the show did him dirty. Yeah, he's a dick in this, but he's sort of like a lovesick puppy kind of dick. In the show, he's just dirty. He's a creep. And that whole scandalous takedown, which I think was done so well in the show, of him having a bastard offspring in the country with a maid and he doesn't even take care of him. I liked that in the show. In this, it doesn't happen. Nigel Burbrook marries Philippa Featherington in this book. At the end of this book, it's like just a sentence thrown in. And you're like, wait, what? Yeah, so that's... And you don't get any of the Featherington story. Marina is not in this book. That whole storyline of her coming to the Featheringtons and being sort of sponsored by them to set up in society, her being pregnant and then trying to lure people in to marry and ends up with the entanglement with Colin, and then Penelope outing her in the Lady Whistledown scandal eventually when she won't leave him alone. None of that happens in this. None of it. Now we'll get into, I mean, I've been critical of stuff like this before. Some people say, well, why bother reading it? I like a guilty pleasure book. I like reading it. It infuriates me, but I do like it. So one of my criticisms in this book and in some of these books in general is the irrational jealousy of the guy and the meek and subservient answer from the girl. And it's like, you feel like reaching through the page and throttling them. Like, I'll give an example. There are many examples, but I'll give you one. So they've just got married and they're on the wedding night. And he's saying that he is so glad that she is ignorant and doesn't know what's going on. That is a trope in this book. And he says that he might have to kill the next man who so much as looks at Daphne sideways. And she laughs and goes, get this. It is so perfectly, splendidly wonderful to be the object of such irrational jealousy. Thank you. Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. Oh. I feel like slapping her. And then there's a bit that I don't like because, of course, in every Regency novel, you have to quote a classic. Usually the classic being Pride and Prejudice, which is in this, and they don't even do it right. Let's see, where is it? This author can only imagine the level of relief in the Hastings household. After all, it is as truth universally acknowledged that a married man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of an heir. Can't they just leave Jane Austen alone? She wrote the classics. She wrote the how-to book for shit like this. And the only good quote that I like in this book, and I like it enough to have actually written it down, is Daphne's thinking, this is, where they're engaged, they're about to get married. Spoilers. The series was everywhere. You know how it ends. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Through all their thinking, she thinks that it's better to live with the man that she loved than to have children with one she didn't. It's the best quote in the entire book, and the only kind of real thing in it. Now, this book, I haven't read any of the other Bridgerton books, and I've only seen the 2 series of Bridgerton that's been out at the point of making this video. The 3rd season's coming out in a few months or so. But there's a very controversial scene in this book. It's quite jarring. It doesn't seem to fit. It doesn't seem to fit the book, the story, or the characters. And it's very problematic for any number of reasons. And I don't know why the author included it. If anything, probably just for a shock factor. It doesn't belong in here. And that scene is... So Simon's told her that he can't have children, whereas in fact he won't, because of... He does it to vex. He doesn't want the line to continue as one final fuck you to his father. And so when they are doing the do, he uses the pull-out method. Now, anyone who actually uses the pull-out method, it doesn't always work. If ever. But it works in this book. He does his do on the sheets and leaves it there and sleeps in it. Ugh. Leaves it there and sleeps, but that isn't even the problematic bit. Saltburn, this isn't. The problematic bit is they're having a bit of an argument and Daphne finds out that he's doing it on purpose and he told her he can't when in fact he won't. And he goes out and gets drunk. She goes and sleeps in her own room and locks the door. He comes back after a full night of drinking. He's practically paralytic. He goes up and he bangs on her door and he can hardly stand. He can hardly talk. He hardly knows what he's doing. And he ends up banging on her door. She opens it. He falls over. He can hardly talk. He's not coherent. He needs help to the bed. She takes pity on him and she gets him on the bed and she gets him there. And she thinks that if they have sex now, he is in no capacity to pull out, especially if she is on top. She thinks about this, and she thinks about it for a few paragraphs. This is not some accident. And not only does she think about it, she does it. So he is beyond drunk, and I don't know what the logistics are. Can a guy still perform the do while extremely inebriated and practically falling asleep? Guys, let me know. Not that many guys watch my videos, but they might do, and they might help me. But she does, and she gets on, not to be too graphic, but she gets on top and they're doing the do. He knows they're doing the do, and he thinks, she looks lovely and she looks great, and but I won't be able to pull out. But she'll stop. If I tell her to stop, she'll stop. Now, he doesn't actually tell her to stop. But she makes sure that he can't move away from her. So she pins him and she makes sure that his seed goes into her rather than on the sheets. And she knows that he doesn't want it. She knows that he doesn't want to do it like this. Even while she's doing the do, she is thinking, she knows that he doesn't want this. And she does it anyway. Now, you can guess the controversy around that scene. If the roles were reversed, that scene wouldn't even be in this book. If the roles were reversed, it's classed as a form of rape. So, with it being a woman and with the roles as they are, I would still class it as a form of rape. Or at least I can't remember the wording for it. Like when you forcibly get pregnant by like putting holes in condoms, etc. Not that condoms are 99% accurate, but you know, like if you force it. I can't remember what the word is. Oh, that's so annoying. Anyway. And she thinks she gets pregnant from this. And that is the controversial scene in this. I don't think it should have been there. It could have been worked out in any number of other ways. And it's problematic for so many reasons to list. And in reading the book, it would have been like close to a 4-star for me. I did enjoy the introduction of the characters. I enjoyed the banter back and forth. It's actually a slow falling in love. They don't do it like that. And it would have been a 4. But because of that scene, I can't. It takes it down to at most a 3. If not lower. But I'll give it 3 just because the rest of it is alright. That scene, Why, when there is... It didn't need it. I didn't like it. I don't like the character for it. And they actually included... I knew that scene was coming up because they included that scene on the show. And I didn't like it then either. I thought it was unnecessary. And it didn't need to be there. This is romance. Why you have your main female character, at the very least, sexually assault the main male character and face no repercussions for it. Alright, he goes away, but he comes back because he loves her. It's like... No, you don't take advantage of somebody when they're drunk, regardless of whether you want a child or not. No, just no. But if you've read this book or if you've seen the show, please let me know down in the comments below and what your opinion of the rest of this was. And yeah, what your opinion is of that scene. Am I just reading too much into it? Is it not supposed to be that deep? No pun intended. But let me know down in the comment section below, and as always, well, maybe not as always, but keep reading.